We shall soon be nothing but transparent heaps of jelly to one another. That's a quote from a New York Times article from 1897 about the invention of a then terrifying technology, the telephone. A female passenger's body will simply melt at speeds of over 50 miles an hour. When trains were first invented, this is what people thought. There was a really well-respected writer that made this whole case that if a woman travels at speed, her uterus will stay in the same place and her body will continue traveling. That's what people thought, genuinely. Have I done the world good, or have I simply added menace? This is a quote from Marconi. Does anybody know who Marconi is? Marconi was the inventor of wireless technology. So the inventor of radios, essentially, famously was plagued by morality about whether his invention was ultimately good for the world or whether radios were just going to add menace to our cultures. I'll let you decide on whether he did or he didn't. So the reason I'm telling you this is humans, we are scared little weirdos. It's a universal fact. The thing that brings us together, there's some knowing nods from some scared weirdos in the audience. The thing that brings us together is actually history tells us that we don't like change, that we're more likely to focus on the negative impacts than the positive. We have a natural inclination to get scared. We focus on losses way more than gains. And I don't know about you, but our world is currently changing and changing quickly. And so it's important that we acknowledge this and we know this kind of dynamic that we're working with. But we absolutely can do this. We can build and practically unshakable teams that are confident, resilient, and adaptive, even though perhaps our fundamental nature might not be. And I know this because in 2014, I was stood in a stairwell of my then office crying. I'd just been promoted to lead a team, and I got given some feedback that I was playing favorites, that I was micromanaging. I thought I was the worst manager in the world. And honestly, then I certainly wasn't very good at leading. Now, a few years later, I've trained Fortune 500 companies, leadership skills all over the world. Now, I have spent my life, truly my life, watching lawyer shows. I love them. Legal dramas, I love everything about them. I like the outfits. I like how people walk around in heels and they have coffees and they go, "You've been subpoenaed." I don't know what that means. It is my life goal to walk up to someone and go, "You've been subpoenaed." Now, I have spent so long watching these that I genuinely think I'm qualified to give sound legal counsel. I don't know what the bar is, but I'm pretty sure I'll pass it. Okay, so this talk is not your standard talk. I'm not going to just tell you things. What I'm going to do, my friends, is I'm going to use my knowledge from the thousands of hours of legal dramas I have watched, and I'm going to make a case. I'm going to make a case, and I'm going to give you a series of evidence as to why things are hard and how we can make it, and I'm going to end with a closing statement. The case I'm making is, why is this true? It is true. I'm sure many of you here have people issues in your business. I'm sure many of you struggle with things like attrition, people not doing what you need them to, telling people to do something 1,000 times, people saying, "Oh, we just can't do it like that," people saying no to your ideas, constantly getting blockers. 75% of careers are derailed for reasons related to people. Businesses are derailed because of reasons related to people. So from this place, how can we practically build behaviors that help us consistently perform in chaos? Because it is chaos. Whether you're a startup or an established business, the world we're working in now is fast-moving and chaotic. So let's start here. Why are 75% of careers derailed for reasons related to people? I've spent years learning about this stuff now. I could give you thousands of reasons why people are often some of the stickiest challenges in a business. I'm just going to give you 5. I'm going to give you 5 I've picked at random, 5 reasons why. So I run a conference. It's called Confidence Live. It's in its 2nd year, and was it a mistake? I don't know. I decided to do it in my hometown. So my hometown is, does anyone mind if I swear? Thank you. I thought I'd ask permission. My hometown is a notorious shithole. Honestly, it is one of the most economically deprived towns in the country, so I thought I would like to give back to the community that made me. So put on this event, poured my heart and my soul and my money into it, took loads of risk. The first year, my mum came. Like, that, you're doing something scary, and then your mum's there, makes it so much worse, or doesn't it? And afterwards, it was so vulnerable for me, and afterwards I got the feedback. So 90.1% of people said that it exceeded expectations. 7% said it met expectations, and for 3% of people, it didn't meet their expectations. They were disappointed by the experience. Which one did I focus on? Like, so much. I teach this stuff, my friends, and honestly, I got that feedback, and I was like, oh God, that was a disaster. I truly thought it was awful. I was reading the negative stuff like some kind of addict. My friends were like, Kirsty, it went really well. I was like, no, because Dave said something mean. Like, I really, really, really found it difficult to actually have a balanced perspective at that time. And I know that you do this, and I know that maybe you could stand in a presentation and you're nailing it, you're bringing your A game, you're like, yeah, I've got this. But then if you're anything like me, just halfway through, you just say something a bit weird. I don't know why, you've just said something weird halfway through the presentation, and then you leave and you spend 2 hours, 3 hours, 3 months obsessing over that one little weird thing you said in an otherwise amazing presentation. Every single person in this room, every single human you've ever met, is genetically predisposed to focus on the negative. Now, some of us grow our way through this, but as humans, we have a genetic baseline to focus on the bad stuff more than the good stuff. It's just an evolutionary mechanism. You know, we didn't evolve to move through the world being like, yes, queen. We kind of have to do that for ourselves. If you think about the early stages of human evolution, we haven't really changed since then. So let's imagine you're walking through the plains of the savannah and you see a tiger. It's in your interest to focus on that tiger. You're not going to stand there going, oh, I've got a fantastic relationship with my family. You're going to be like, there's a tiger there. Only now it's not a tiger. It's reports, it's investors, it's teams, it's standing on stages, public speaking, awkward conversations. You could do 1,000 things right and you mess one thing up. That's what we often focus on. Founders are made slightly different, but you might feel this behavior in yourself. Yeah, founders tend to be a little bit less, feel this so intensely. So you either see this in yourself, and you might also see it in your teams. What a narcissist. Right, so that's me when I was like 2 or something, and I honestly think you can trace back all of my extroverted performant tendencies to that dress. So I was about 2 years old, and I was already starting to display and demonstrate some of these things that I'm sharing with you now. As humans, we have a couple of fears built in. So does anybody want to guess, actually, just for a laugh? Does anybody want to shout out a fear that you think every single human has? Rejection. You've got it, my friend. Round of applause for this legend here. Woo! There you go. Every single person is built with a fear of social exclusion. Neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman has done lots of studies on this, and he's identified that in our brains we feel emotional pain in the same place as we feel physical pain. So if, say, for example, I called one of you out of the audience now and was like, you friend, could you come stand on this stage? You'd be like, no. Obviously no. You know when you're on a Zoom call and someone asks you and you've got to say your bit and you're like, oh my God, I've got to talk to people. Like, as humans, we are wired to belong. So if you struggle giving feedback conversations, if you struggle telling people they're not doing a good enough job, if you're scared of public speaking, if you don't like pitching, if you don't like speaking to investors, if sometimes you worry that you're not good enough, if you worry about letting your team down, your friends down, your family down, hello friends, welcome to your fundamental humanity. You actually weren't built to go out on your own. So certainly if anybody has started a business, if anybody leads teams, there is a part of you that is akin to threatening your survival. We evolved in packs, we evolved in groups, so stepping outside of that pack, it's actually quite challenging for us. In my early 20s, I went on holiday to Cyprus with a friend I then had called Carly. We were early in our careers, we'd become very fast friends. Now, we were in Cyprus in this beautiful, cultural, historical island. I don't know if any of you have been. So we're there in our early 20s and we're enjoying the museums and the galleries. We're going to see art. Obviously, we weren't doing any of that. I was in my 20s, you piece the rest together. So me and Carly had this fantastic time. We went clubbing, we went drinking, we stayed up all night, we shared those kind of fun experiences you tend to have when you're a little bit younger. A week later, I'm sat in a boardroom in front of Carly with the HR director, talking to her about how she was underperforming at work. because I'd been promoted to her boss. Has anybody ever had that? 68% of managers say transitioning from peer to leader is one of their biggest challenges. I don't think we talk about this enough, that one day you're there having beers with your coworkers and then suddenly you're having to do performance reviews with them. That's really, really hard. And when I had to do this, the whole advice I got was, suck it up. And that's actually really difficult when you want to be kind and empathetic. I do like to think that I'm probably quite a kind and empathetic person. And one of the things that I've invested a lot of time and energy in over the years is trying to level the professional playing field. So I used to work in tech. I work in culture and leadership and development now. But I used to run an agency with clients. I was having meetings with the senior C-suite at IBM. I've given thousands of hours truly to mentoring women in STEM. I genuinely think I'm not exaggerating if I say there's hundreds, if not thousands, more women speaking on stages as a direct result of the work that I've done. A lot of my personal capital, I'll invest in female-founded businesses. I am incredibly passionate about the fact that women don't get funding in the way that men do, that women have amazing ideas. It's one of the things in my life that I've spent so much time and energy on. And do you want to know a secret? I also have a moderate subconscious bias that men are better at science. That's true. True. And when I shared this with my friend was like, you're going to tell people about that bias on a stage? And I was like, of course I am. Of course I'm going to tell you that I was raised in a world where I saw men doing maths and girls doing art. And that's going to have an impact on me as an adult. Because the importance with bias is we don't shame it. We actually acknowledge it so that we can work with it. If you're sitting in the audience thinking, oh no, that's not me, I don't have that bias, I would call that confirmation bias. So my friends, you are riddled with bias. Think like medieval peasant and lice. You are absolutely riddled with bias. I think if you take one thing away from this talk, let it be that you are just so biased as humans we are. And often we add a lot of moral judgments to this, whereas we really, really don't need to. You know, you have millions of pieces of data and information pouring into your brain at any given second. We have to do something called approximation. Approximation is what allows us to make decisions quickly. But if you sit in this audience thinking that you don't have a gender bias, you don't have a race bias, you don't have a sexuality bias, you're almost certainly wrong. It's true for all of us. This is another reason why things like this might happen. Imagine for a second that I'm your boss, nobody wants it, nobody needs it, but imagine that I was and I text you and I was like, 10 minutes for a quick chat? Your entire career flashes before your eyes. Let's make it even more. Let's imagine it's your partner. If your partner's like, need to talk, you're like, oh my God, I need to move out. Have I got enough savings? Will I make it on my own? And they're like, lasagna or beef? Like, like this is just what we do, because did you know that ambiguity for us will always be perceived negatively? If you give someone an ambiguous statement like quick chat, we're going to go to the negative. In any given context, if we're giving people ambiguous information, then of course we're going to perceive that negatively. So there's just a few things that can get in the way of why it can be difficult to build resilient, adaptive, happy to have feedback, open to growth cultures. So how can we practically build behaviors that actually help us to overcome this? So I've done it. Kirsty has literally solved all of our people problems. Is one of the things that my clients said to me. I'm not going to be able to solve your people problems in 15 minutes, but I'm going to try. I wanted this to be as solutions-focused as possible. So I started this talk with 5 reasons why cultures can be messy, and I'm going to give you 25 practical things that you can do right now. Now, you can apply this to your friendships, your partnerships, your teams, any given context, because what I'm talking about is essentially just how humans human. 60,000 is roughly the amount of individuals I've trained at this point. I have met leaders in different sectors, different cultures, all over the world, and honestly, I think I've met 2 that actually really manage to create a culture where people work hard, get things done, but it's respectful, where people work hard and are productive, but there's none of that like janky intensity. I've seen 2 cultures that manage to really create meaningful work-life balance for their employees. Out of all of the teams I've met, so prevalent to these difficulties. One of them was ex-performing, really high-level athlete, like top of his game athlete. The other leader of one of these teams was literally a Buddhist who'd spent some time in his monastery in his youth. So these two people had really learned not to sweat the small stuff. Now, we don't need to go and become monks unless, of course, you want to. I would respect that choice. That's awesome. But that's not necessarily what I'm saying. But what I am saying is what these two leaders had really learned is how to model the skills that they want to see in their business. People can't be what they can't see. And so often what I see is founders, managers, leaders, whether you're managing 2 people or 2,000 people, this doesn't make a difference. If you want your team to be focused, confident, calm, productive, you have to be that first, my friends. Good leadership is an inside-out approach. We model the behaviors that we see in our teams. So here's some things that you can do. So model the behaviors you want to see in your team. Reflect on undesirable behaviors and ask yourself, in what ways am I creating them? This is one of the first things I get teams to do when I'm doing leadership training. So I'll give you an example. Does anybody here have a team who maybe they come to you all the time with questions? They're like asking you questions all the time. They're like, what should I do about this? What should I do about this? And you just want them to trust themselves and have some initiative. I guarantee you respond with the answer. I bet you do. Now, if you want to build teams where they believe in themselves and they trust themselves, you have to make sure that you're facilitating that. It's something as simple as walk and talk meetings instead of sitting at your desks. Make key behaviors billable. This is especially important if anybody here works in an agency. If you want a creative, innovative team, you have to make creative, innovative thought billable for the business. If you don't make the behaviors you want to see in your team billable, i.e. considered to be revenue driving, people will never implement them. Another thing that my Buddhist monk friend did was this. Now, as humans, we tend to think that motivation kind of just happens to us. By the way, I'm a motivational speaker. This is my day job. It is my day job to stand on stages and make you believe in yourselves, and some days I cannot be asked. Like, some days I wake up and I'm like, no, not today, not feeling it. The good thing about motivation, though, is we think it's either there or it isn't, whereas actually we do have a little bit of agency over it, just a little bit. As humans, we're kind of binary. We have something called away state motivation and something called toward state motivation. Away state motivation is kind of what it says on the tin. So away state motivation is when your brain and your body perceives a negative and you try to move away from that negative. So this might be going like, don't want to lose the team, don't want to run out of money, don't want to run out of funding, don't want to let people down, don't want people to think I'm lazy, I have imposter syndrome, I don't want people to think I'm not good at my job, I'm going into this meeting and this client's really difficult. This is all away state motivation. This is when we motivate ourselves essentially through fear. As a result, there is a physiological response to that. When we use away state motivation, research has shown our cortisol gets higher. Some of you may know what cortisol is. Cortisol is our stress hormone. I don't want to give anyone an existential crisis in the afternoon, but there is no such thing as a stressful situation. Stay with me. That was slightly clickbaity, but stay with me. Of course there are stressful situations, but where does the stress live, in the situation or you? The stress lives on you. So what this means, if you have high cortisol, your adaptability to the stressful situation goes down. So let's say you've got one of those days where you wake up and you're like, I've got this. I've totally got this. And then the same situation, another day, can feel crippling. When we use a significant amount of away state motivation, everything gets a little bit harder. My Nan Vera was a psychic, spiritualist, medium gypsy. She was a vibe. And she used to say, the onions are in the soup. What I mean by that is you don't need to now go away and take the onions of the soup of your away state motivation out. I don't know if that metaphor works. What we want to do is add more in. I'm going to get you to do something weird. I feel like we're vibing. Okay, so just please do this, otherwise it's going to be weird for everyone, and I feel like we're friends. Aren't we friends? Yes. Thank you. Okay, so what I'm going to get you to do, just shout out a food that you would put in a soup. Carrots. Give me some more. Celery. Yes, more. Chicken. Thank you. We've got a protein. Give us a carb. Yes, yes, lovely, lovely. A fantastic soup, delicious. It is our job to add more into the soup for our teams. So most people will naturally motivate themselves with a waste state motivation. It's just what we do. We're negative naturally. We are given it when we are raised. Anybody here only really capable of getting things done unless you're like really close to the deadline? Oh, you've had weeks to do it. You've had weeks, but you're not getting it done. That's a perfect example of a waste state motivation. Let those onions be in the soup. It works. Just add in more toward state. Now, I'm not making this up. Toward state motivation is simply when we're moving towards an exciting positive rather than moving away from a scary negative. Neuroscientist David Rock has shown when you motivate people with toward state motivation, their entire brains light up, motivational processes engage, we become more open, we become more receptive, we become more innovative, and we become more creative. If you need people to be creative, solve problems, come up with new solutions, we need toward state motivation. But don't worry, I've got you. Here's how you do it. First, you need to learn to listen, actually listen. It's hard, and it can be person-to-person dependent, but I genuinely don't think I ever listened to anyone until I was about 29 years old, and I'm not even exaggerating, because I didn't learn. I'm not necessarily naturally a listener. I get excited, I want to talk, you have something to say, I have something to say, whereas what true listening is giving people your presence in the moment. That's when someone's talking to you and you're not in your head scripting what you're going to say next. You're not thinking about what you're going to eat. You're just giving them your presence. One of the reasons this is so important is when we feel listened and heard, again, our cortisol lowers, something called oxytocin increases, which is how we build rapport. You can't learn this overnight, but next time a friend, a colleague, a coworker, a partner comes to you with a problem in particular, try and just listen. This is what will happen if you've never learned it. If you've never learned it before, you'll listen for like a second, and then you'll be like, I'm doing it. Oh, yeah, I'm doing it. I'm doing my listening. And then you'll be like, I really did like that song. What was that song I used to listen to in the 80s? Wait, no, yeah, listening. You'll go in and out, so it's a skill that you practice. Start each Monday meeting with team members sharing one positive thing. This is important. Don't just ask what the people, if you manage people, don't just say, what are you doing this week? Say, what are you excited about this week? It's a tiny semantic shift, but it does make a difference. Use if-based questions. Oh, I love this. I'm going to go through this quite quickly, but stay with me. This is maybe one of the most transformational skills I learned. I learned this when I was still running my agency. If-based questions, again, come from a neuroscientist called David Rock. And when he put people in the MRI scanners and he asked people if-based questions, again, all of that good neurological stuff happened. An if-based question is instead of saying to someone, why have you done it like that? It's saying, if you were to do this even better next time, what would you do differently? Instead of saying to someone, why won't you sign this idea off? It's saying, if there were no obstacles, what would we do? The reason if-based questions are so powerful is it pushes people into that toward state thinking and then gets them to action plan. If you have someone on your team who's consistently underperforming, say to them, if you were delivering your job even better, what would be good? If you want people to set goals and motivate themselves, if you loved working here, what would you be doing differently? If-based questions are fantastic. Develop a daily practice of your team considering what they have done well. If you have a team and you want them to believe in themselves and stop building confidence, stop telling them that they're good. It doesn't work. You know when you're like feeling a bit down on yourself and your friend goes, oh, but you're awesome. You're not like, yes, you're right, thank you. That's not how it works. If we want to start really believing in ourselves, we have to start telling it to ourselves. Pull people to solutions with what are your options. Again, one of the challenges that you might have, I don't know, is people come to you with their problems all the time, don't they? They're like, I can't do it because of this, and then Dave in accounts did that, and then we don't have the budget, and then that person did that, and then that person did that. That's okay. Listen to them, engage that listening, and then say, thank you for sharing that with me. What are your options? What are your options? Stop giving people the solutions. What are your options consistently? Make your praise specific. Stop saying to people, great job, it's rubbish. Instead, say, I really liked how you color-coded those cells on the spreadsheet. Specific compliments are easier to take. Those are some simple things that you can do to start building confidence. This is Dr. Alex Pentland. Dr. Alex Pentland is from MIT, and he's done some research on something called honest signals. Honest signals are essentially what makes us connect as humans. Now, the reason this is interesting for us is Alex Pentland was at a business conference with a business professor from Harvard, and I like to imagine them having a chat over a glass of scotch. And the business professor was saying, oh, I've just taught my MBA students how to write a really good pitch, a really good investor deck. And Alex Pentland is like, pointless, you don't need to do that, it's a waste of time. Because that's not how people make decisions. I just burped, that's fine, let's keep moving. The business professor was like, obviously this is important. And so then Alex Pentland was like, right, let me give you a wager. Let's do a wager. So Alex Pentland was like, give me all of your incredible, amazing founders and people running businesses, and I will be able to guess who gets investment. Not from the business plan, not from their smart data, not from the slides. He didn't want to see anything. The only thing that Dr. Alex Pentland wanted to see was the first 5 seconds that somebody entered the space. That's it. That's all he saw. As a guess for me, with how much accuracy could him and his team guess who got the investment? Some shout-outs. 87%. 87%. It is not your data, it is not your business plan, it is not your information. That is cool, it is necessary, but what makes you succeed is the energy you bring into the space. Also, by the way, research has also shown that investors are more likely to invest on a sunnier day. These are hard-hitting VCs. The idea that you are rational, data-driven, not emotional people is a myth. All of the decisions you make are emotional. If you're sitting in the audience now thinking, I don't believe that, that's an emotional response. Hello, I see you. We are fundamentally emotional people. So warning, this next piece of advice is so helpful, a client literally painted it on his office door. If you want to be a better leader, if you want to make more money, just be mindful of the energy you bring into the space. Now that's cool because I think you already know how to do that. You already know how to do that. So what do we need to do? We need to understand that humans are mostly emotional, messy and complex. After meetings, attendees write and share a 2-sentence summary of key points. You're biased. We take information in different ways. Test your bias without judgment. If you do a test and it comes out that you're really biased, that's okay. That's how we get better at this stuff. How do I want my team and my client to feel? If you want a client, an investor, your team to feel a certain way, you have to feel it. That's non-negotiable. Use the framework, thoughts, feelings, actions, results. Okay, so research has shown that your thoughts impact your feelings impact your actions, and your actions impact your results. And it kind of goes like this. So in other words, if you go into a situation going, oh my God, I'm going to hate this, they're going to ask me really difficult questions and I don't like it, you're going to show up ever so slightly differently in that. So just make sure when you go into a situation, you're mindful of the thoughts you think before you doing it. Please stop assuming that the people you interact with are dickheads. Like we do, don't we? Imagine if for a second I was stood there going, that audience, look at them. Like I wouldn't be able to connect with you or show up in this kind of way. Okay, I'm going to close very quickly with something called growth and fixed mindsets. Is everyone familiar with growth and fixed mindsets? I'm not going to teach it to you now. I'm not going to spend too long on this. But ultimately, this is people with a fixed mindset. The reason I'm telling this audience, raise of hands, who here was academically smart as a kid? Right, I'm a professional. I could almost guarantee you got a fixed mindset. So fixed mindset people want to do well. They don't like to fail. They're often perfectionists. I think the school system breeds it in people who've done well. Growth mindset, anyone here who's academically quite poor, we don't mind. We're comfortable with failing. So growth mindset people are better at failing. We tend to be able to kind of like see setbacks as an ability to grow and learn. I'm going to share, you can test what you are, but I first learned about this in about 2016. I was doing some leadership training because I'd established that I was a really bad leader and a really bad manager. So I started training myself on this kind of stuff. Now, I did this quiz, and I came out as somebody with a strong, fixed mindset. Really on the fixed side of the spectrum. That's not bad. It's okay. It just means I was a bit of a perfectionist. I really wanted to do a good job. I started walking myself through a process that I'll share with you, the exact one I started walking myself through. This was in about 2016-ish. I was fairly early in my speaking journey. I hadn't done much speaking. I got invited to speak at this really, really, really big conference. You don't need to know my life story, but I grew up in an economically deprived town and an economically deprived family. I did not expect to have any kind of level of success. So my imposter syndrome was raging, but I was like, I'm going to go. I'm going to give it my best shot. So I go to this conference. It was in the US. It was the first time I'd ever traveled outside of Europe. I go to this conference. There's this huge, big stage. There's hundreds of people in the audience. And there's 2 big screens projecting my image, just like the world's worst Beyoncé. And so I start going. And I don't know about you, but sometimes if I'm nervous or excited, I kind of start talking quite quickly. It was a really inclusive event. So they had someone live subtitling everything that I was saying as I was saying it. So I'm delivering my talk, and then suddenly the whole audience erupts into laughter. And I had no idea why. I thought I'd been accidentally hilarious, so I carried on. And then I go, and then suddenly the audience is laughing again. And then it happens again. It becomes very clear that I'm being laughed at. I'm like looking down at myself, like, am I naked? Like all of the worst things that could happen to a person are happening to me in that moment. And then I stop and I go, sorry, what are you laughing at? And this big booming voice in the front row goes, the person subtitling can't understand that weird accent. Like, thank you. I felt that big. Like, I'd already decided I wasn't good enough to be there, and now people were laughing at my voice. And so I left. Now, I had a fixed mindset at the time. Fixed mindset, what did I say to myself about public speaking? Never again, thank you. I can't do it, I'm bad at it, I'm never going to do it again. That's how I lived. I stopped public speaking. But then I started developing a growth mindset. I got some feedback through. What did my fixed mindset want to do with that feedback? Burn it to the ground. But what would a growth mindset person do? A growth mindset person would open that feedback. Once a nerd, always a nerd. I took that spreadsheet and I pivoted the data. And I opened it and I was like, okay, well, there's lots of stuff I need to work on. The reason I'm telling you this is I can't teach you a growth mindset now. I can't teach you how to teach it to your teams. But what I can do is tell you that there is absolutely no way I would be stood on this stage having the opportunity to talk to you now if I hadn't actively learned the process of growth mindset. Because you don't know when you're going to mess up. You don't know when you're going to fail. But unless we help ourselves teach us and teach others, our friends, our family, our parents, our children, the ability to nurture a growth mindset, we'll end up just not doing stuff and not being aware of it because of our fixed mindset. So my closing case is that this stuff is hard, you are awesome, and it's all stuff we have to learn. We don't just become great leaders, it's a framework and skills and tools that we can learn over time. You don't need to remember everything I've covered today, but here's a bunch of stuff, a treasure trove of free resources, training, how you can develop growth mindset in your teams. I hope that was helpful. Thank you so much. Thank you. Have an awesome day. Thank you.